So we're going to change this. There we go. G'day. Alright, what if we had quantum computers today? Well, guess what? We do. They already exist. They're just kind of pretty bad. We can talk more about that after we watch some, because I don't want to sit here talking before we, watch something cool. You might have heard that I am making this Cal VPN, which is going to be the first commercially available quantum-proof VPN ever in the world, and yeah, it's going to be awesome. So if you're interested in that, you should come sign up in the description. You might be like, why is this important? Well, you're going to find out in this video, alright? So stick around and I will give you the scoop on what's coming. Let's do it.
Get rid of your old computers, because the future of technology has arrived. It's not artificial intelligence or virtual reality.
I'm sure you've already heard, but don't get rid of your computers, because quantum computers, what they potentially can offer us is something, which is kind of like an add-on to typical classical computing, as we like to call it. So, there's a lot of stuff that these things will be able to do that we currently don't know, like unknown unknowns. But, a lot of people don't think they're going to replace classical computing completely. It'll just be, an add-on, essentially. And like you just said, with artificial intelligence, well, artificial intelligence might be sped up enormously with quantum computing. Quantum AI, you might have heard. It sounds like the ultimate buzzword thing, but it's a real thing, and people are working on this. Google's got like a quantum AI, that's the name of like this lab, and they're working on stuff around that. So it's pretty intriguing. We can talk about that a little bit later.
Completely revolutionize every aspect of our society, from healthcare
that's actually pretty much correct,
to finance and even national security. But what is it?
I would go as far to say as I think what quantum computers will do for society is even bigger than what classical computing did for society.
And how does it work? When can we expect it? And what could happen if it gets into the wrong hands? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we had working quantum computers today. Basically, a quantum computer is a super efficient version of the regular computers you already know and love.
That's not quite correct.
When a regular computer is used to solve a problem, it has to filter through all the possible answers one at a time. Whereas a quantum computer can filter through 1 billion possible answers at once to find the correct one in just a fraction of a second.
Okay, they're not that. So many people say this, but that's not what they're doing. So, let's just keep watching for now, because there's been a lot of misinformation already.
The technology is so advanced that hardly anyone knows how to program it, let alone how to use it. So, how much power and control would quantum computing give to the first country or person who perfects it? Alright, to understand how quantum computers are going to change your life, it helps to understand how they will.
So all those big companies, they're trying to make a useful quantum computer, like IBM. By next year, they're trying to make a 433 qubit. They're still with their semiconductor qubit hardware, which I really don't like. It could work. It probably will work. But I just think if we want to get, exponentially more qubits involved, it needs to be something else. And I'll talk a bit about it, mostly in this video, actually, like silicon quantum computing and using nuclear electric resonance, which has been pioneered and discovered in Australia. But we'll come back to that. So IBM next year, and then the year after, they're actually eyeing off the Condor chip, which is apparently they're aiming to have about 1,000 qubits in that one. So that'll be pretty interesting, because at about the 1,000 qubit range to 1 million, we might be able to do some pretty useful things. And obviously, there's a big elephant in the room, which is, how long you can store this quantum information. That's a big elephant in the room for Google and IBM are making. But again, with this silicon nuclear electric resonance stuff that I'm going to tell you guys about, they have some records there. It's like 35 seconds they've been able to hold the quantum information for, which is like a million times better than Google's, which is in like the hundreds of microseconds. So yeah, there's lots I need to tell you about that. And then Google's aiming to have a 1,000,000 qubit device by 2029. So that's pretty exciting. Intel are also eyeing off at a 1,000,000 qubit device, but they're actually trying to do it with silicon. So they're taking all of Australia's breakthroughs in this area, which we're going to talk about more in this video. That's what I'm going to focus on because that's what I'd be betting on, getting us to, opening up quantum computers to, really changing the world for us. So it's extremely exciting. Can't wait to tell you more about it in this video. Like I've already mentioned, crappy quantum computers already do exist, and they can do some calculations which are not easily replicable on supercomputers. And, Google famously claimed quantum supremacy with their 53 qubit device. So that is exciting. Google and IBM are facing a pretty big hurdle though, which is error correction, because at the quantum scale, there's lots of these random fluctuations. So keeping these qubits entangled is a real challenge because these random fluctuations result in so many errors. And that's another reason why silicon quantum computing is going to get us there, because very recently there's been a paper published how some researchers in Australia, I've got to sneeze. Again, these Australian researchers published a paper recently in Nature demonstrating how with silicon qubits you can actually get an error fidelity of 99.95%. That's incredible. 3 qubits. So that is the way to go. And you can also hold the quantum information for way longer than Google's quantum computer. I think the record in Australia with the same team is 35 seconds. That's like an eternity compared to what Google's can do, which is 100 microseconds. So it's 1,000,000 times less. And that's a bit of an elephant in the room for Google, because that is important. If you want to do a calculation which takes time on the quantum computer, well, it's got to be quicker than 100 microseconds. Otherwise, all these errors pop up. That's why error correction is important. So with the silicon qubits, we're demonstrating, error correction is great. You can hold it for a lot longer because the reason why these silicon qubits are so resistant is
First, today, computers are binary. They process information using bits, where every bit can only exist as a 1 or a 0, and nothing else. A bit is relatively simple. It's a state or another, like if a light bulb is on or off. In today's computers, a bit is represented by a current pulse or an electrical voltage. Are you still with me? All right, we're almost there. In the case of quantum computers, information is processed using qubits. These are similar to bits, but they can be 1s and 0s at the same time. To understand the difference between bits and qubits, picture a sphere and give it both a north and south pole, where the North Pole represents 1 and the South Pole represents 0. With a bit, the poles are the only usable spaces on the entire sphere, and only one of them can be used at a time. With a qubit, the whole sphere becomes a usable territory. You know the complicated physics behind it, but the main point to take away is that qubits can deliver more complex data and allow us to encode more information into much smaller computers. Some of the most progressive tech companies like Google, NASA, and IBM have already made versions of this technology. Now they're racing to perfect it. Once they're perfected, quantum computers will offer lots of benefits.
So let's talk a bit about silicon quantum computing and some of the results coming out of Australia, because they are changing everything for quantum computing and are possibly bringing quantum computers within a few years away. This silicon quantum computing are claiming they're going to have useful commercial products within approximately 5 years. Google claims they're going to have a useful quantum computer by 2029. So this stuff really is about 5 years away. I think the approach that is going to result in, the hardware of quantum computers that are useful coming from Andrea Morello's team, Professor Andrea Morello from University of Sydney. He was the first to develop spin qubits in silicon, which, kind of made everyone go, wow, okay, that changes everything for quantum computers. So these silicon-based quantum processors are going to rely on basically the nuclear spins of atoms as the main quantum processor. And what do I mean by that? Well, just as electrons have spin, so does the nuclei of atoms, okay? They have spin. And, you know, you can obviously manipulate this stuff. Just like we like to say, electrons spin up or spin down. Same with the nuclei. And what you can do is you can entangle the spin of this nuclei with the electron of the same atom, right? Then you can take that electron somewhere else and entangle that with another nuclei of a different atom. And that pretty much opens up the way to have very large arrays of qubits and powerful quantum computers. So now you might be asking about like error correction. Everyone's always talking about this in this area. Well, this same team has just shown in a Nature paper how robust this hardware is going to be, because they showed, we'll talk about it in a second. All traditional computers, right, they have some form of error correction, data redundancy. We'll talk about what error correction is in a second. The point is that computers have this, they need it, but quantum physics basically imposes some pretty severe restrictions on error correction in quantum computing. So let's talk about this error correction. There's been some recent breakthroughs in error correction, quantum error correction protocols. So you can chuck a lot of the stuff you've read, you know, within the last few years in the bin, because we have made some ingenious breakthroughs there. And we can talk about that as well. It's a lot to talk about. But the point is that we've also worked out that you're going to need error rates of less than about 1%. For, you know, quantum computers to be robust enough to make reliable, you know, calculations. And guess what? The same team did that. Again, very recently, they published a Nature paper which showed error rates of like error-free of like 99.95% in a 3 qubit system, completely entangled in silicon. That is basically opened the way to useful and reliable quantum computing. They're coming. They're coming. So that means we can now create silicon quantum processors that scale up, work reliably, and deliver useful calculations. So another super advantage of this way of making quantum computers, rather than the superconducting qubit approach of Google and IBM, is you can actually isolate this quantum information for like 35 seconds, I think their current record is, which might not sound like much, but that's an eternity when you consider that Google's superconducting quantum computer could only isolate quantum information for like microseconds. I think it was 100 microseconds, which is nearly 1 million times slower. So the reason this team was able to get like 35 seconds is because of the extreme isolation of nuclear spins with their environment. A major drawback of this previously was that because they're so isolated, it's hard to get them to interact with, you know, other qubits. But the same paper we're talking about showed how they're able to overcome this with an electron entangled with 2 nuclei, 2 phosphorus nuclei atoms. Problem solved. And so this really is the way of future, and it's silicon based. So these nuclei that are separated, you know, they store the information very well. And now they've shown you have the option to make them talk to each other via that electron. That opens the way for, again, useful quantum computing. And this really is a huge milestone in trying to get there. And again, people are like, we're nowhere near it. Guess what? We're getting close. So it's pretty clear these semiconductor spin qubits are going to become the kind of platform of choice, because you can store information, quantum information in them for so long, and they're so reliable. Like I was saying, the drawback of them was you couldn't get them to interact. But now we can. And not only that, they're nearly devoid of the errors pop up. We can correct them faster than they pop up. Okay, so this is huge. This is the platform of choice for quantum computers. So I've been following this team ever since I read about their incredible breakthrough in rediscovering essentially electric magnetic resonance. Now, let me just tell you a bit about this, because this is so cool. This was an accidental discovery. They were doing a purely curiosity-driven experiment. So this is why curiosity-driven experiments are so important. And by accident, they basically discovered something that might just open the door to quantum. I think it will open the door to quantum computing. That's very cool. So what happened was they were trying to do some nuclear magnetic resonance stuff by controlling some atoms in antimony with a magnetic field, right? And they were using this antenna, and basically this antenna broke yeah, and they realized it was still working, and they realized what they were doing is nuclear electric resonance. So they're trying to we can now control the nucleus of atoms with electric resonance, which is huge because magnetic resonance imaging. By the way, you've probably heard of MRIs, right? Magnetic resonance imaging. It's actually NMRI, but they dropped the nuclear back in the day because people were really scared of nuclear, so they just called it MRI. So where was I going with this? So the reason why this is so awesome is because magnetic fields are very hard to confine. You need powerful, big coils and powerful magnetic fields, and it's very coarse and messy. And based on the laws of physics, you're just going to interact with a lot of stuff. A good example is like if you're trying to play the game of pool, and you're trying to move a ball, it's kind of like picking up the whole table and shaking it, all right? And this is how most other traditional, quantum computers are currently trying to be made with this technology. So, you have the qubits, and the way you manipulate the qubits in like the Google and IBM quantum computers is by, shooting magnetic fields, manipulating magnetic fields to manipulate the qubits, which is very hard to do because like I'm saying, like it kind of messes with everything. All right. You can't localize, the manipulation. Whereas with nuclear electric resonance, you can. It's very localized. You can actually act on, like the very specific point that you want to manipulate. And so this allows us now to manipulate the nuclei of atoms with, some kind of electric antenna, and you can localize that. So that opens the door to like nano electronics and quantum computers, in my opinion. So I think Google and IBM I think that's what they're trying to do now as well. They're going to take this approach because it is, with what they've shown recently, which I was talking about before, is they're showing it's like nearly error-free. We've got the error correction protocols to, overcome the errors, and you can control them now. They've just shown this. So this is the future. And just to finish talking about that little bit, like nuclear magnetic resonance is one of the most widespread technologies in medicine, chemistry. So just imagine what we're going to be able to do with nuclear electric resonance technologies. Okay, let's keep watching.
They'd be a game changer in the field of cryptography, mainly because of their ability to enhance security protocols by generating truly random numbers. Because of this protection, communications devices that are quantum-based could be used to transmit medical and government records, defense data, or other sensitive materials without fear of them ending up in front of the wrong eyes. Being able to calculate and process.
We'll talk about this because what Cal is doing, it has these quantum algorithms. We're going to post quantum cryptography. We'll come back to this. So if you're into cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, all that sort of jazz, it's probably time to start worrying, because a lot of people don't realize that powerful quantum computers will actually be able to kind of ruin cryptocurrencies in general. So it's actually pretty straightforward as to why cryptocurrencies are kind of at risk if these powerful quantum computers already exist, and for when they're coming in the future. And if, hackers or governments just want to steal data currently, and, they can retroactively break the encryption. And that's because every time you make a transaction with a cryptocurrency, you're exposing your public key, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, everyone knows this. But if you have a powerful enough quantum computer, you will potentially be able to, with classical computers, it'll take billions of years, millions to billions. But with the public key, you'll actually be able to probably derive the private key. So if you have the private key, well, then you can do whatever you want. You can make transactions. And so you can kind of see quantum computers are a real problem for cryptocurrencies in general. So a lot of people don't seem to think, we need to worry at all. But it's like, why wouldn't we start preparing for that if it's kind of coming? You know what I mean? And again, it might already be here. So let's quickly talk about why these crappy quantum computers haven't been able to basically break public-private key cryptography yet. So that's basically because we haven't made quantum circuits big enough yet. It's coming though. And so I think a good source I think Microsoft published a paper which said, about 4,000 qubits a circuit will be able to break RSA encryption, and then to break elliptic curve encryption, I think it was like 2,500 qubits, which we're not there yet. You know, what's the record? Like, you know, within the just over 100 qubits. And you got to also remember that Microsoft paper that was accounting for, you know, ideal circumstance in physics is always ideal this. And so these qubits are like in perfect harmony, and it's just not reality. You'd need a lot more qubits than that to really do it in reality. And we can do that when you have enough qubits. You can account for the realistic problems via error correction, and this happens in normal computers as well. And classical error correction is actually pretty easy because you can basically just copy the bits. So if if there's an error, you have a copy. Quantum computers, you can't copy the qubits because there's something called the no cloning theorem, and so the way you do it is by basically having a lot more qubits. Traditionally with this quantum error correction. But now with what this new research out of Australia is showing is you can actually get less than 1% error rates with entangled qubits if you use the paradigm that these researchers are using. My prediction is we're going to have useful quantum computers within the next 5 years. That's why I've created Cal VPN. I think it's very important because, as I keep harping on about, I'll say it one more time, you know, there could be hackers around the world, particularly governments. China could be stealing data, very sensitive data, your data, with the intention of decrypting it, hacking it, when these computers exist, because I'll explain why they're going to be able to hack them using something called Shor's algorithm. So we already know it's possible. So why wouldn't they be doing this? I'm pretty techno-optimistic in general, and especially with quantum computers, from knowing the stuff that I know with the research that I've read. And I really do think that we might be able to break RSA encryption within the next 5 years. And this, I don't want to, put my tinfoil hat on too much and worry you guys, but governments really could have, they could be well ahead in the quantum computing race, and they could actually have very sophisticated quantum computers already. And now if you're saying, hang on a second, you're getting a bit crazy here. Well, keep in mind that governments have been ahead with technology before. Take, for instance, the internet. DARPA. A lot of the infrastructure was developed in secret by DARPA. So that's the internet. Quantum computers is probably pretty comparable to that, paradigm shift of when the internet and the World Wide Web became a thing. So I would not be surprised if America, China does have very secret, pro-black technology. And if they do, well, obviously they're not going to tell anyone. They're going to secretly spy on each other. I think this is actually quite likely, and I think the time to start worrying is right now. And I think if you go listen to experts talk about this, they say the same stuff. So I don't want you to think I'm going off on the wild end of speculation. This is the time to worry is now. And so this is where Cal VPN comes in. It will protect you guys because there is, so let's talk about it. Okay. So what the way it protects you is it's like a normal VPN, right? But it has these post-quantum cryptographic algorithms in it. So important thing to note here is, post-quantum cryptography is very different to quantum cryptography. All right. They sound nearly the same. So post-quantum cryptography, just mathematical problems. There's no special hardware, testing this stuff. That's what Cal VPN utilizes. Whereas quantum cryptography, it uses the properties of quantum mechanics to basically, prove that you can't hack it. So you use these quantum properties to create a shared key between two parties, and you can basically provably show that no one saw the key, because if they did, the communications data would have been destroyed by way of quantum mechanics. You probably heard about superposition and stuff, just observing the wave function collapses, stuff like that. Okay. So again, Cal VPN relies on post-quantum cryptography, mathematical equations, which they should be resistant to all known attacks. Even if the governments have these powerful quantum computers in their hands, they won't be able to get their hands on your data if you use Cal VPN. So post-quantum cryptographic algorithms are just classical algorithms that can basically withstand powerful quantum computers. And it doesn't rely on any hardware, any complicated quantum hardware, no quantum properties. It's just classical stuff. So it really does work, and it can also protect you from, just powerful computers and supercomputers. If you know what I'm talking about, you might also wonder why we don't just double the key size. Well, that has to do with the fact how quantum computers work. They don't just brute force their way through problems. No. So that doesn't really do anything. But these algorithms that will protect you from quantum computers actually come directly from the submissions to NIST, which is the US National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they basically, very recently, within the last month, have announced 4 algorithms which will set the stage for standard encryption, for post-quantum encryption, that is. And there's still 4 other algorithms that they're still looking at to see if they'll work. But this has been a 6-year long competition to find some algorithms that will be able to protect against quantum computers. And so basically our software includes these cryptographic algorithms that will protect you and encrypt your data to a degree where, even if quantum computers are stealing data right now, they will never be able to decrypt them. So if you're interested in the specific post-quantum algorithms and you want to check them out yourselves, go look up Crystal's Kyber, Crystal's Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx. They're the ones that have been currently selected by NIST to work, essentially. And it's awesome. We might talk briefly about them in the dedicated videos that I make. They're just quite complicated. The math is, not straightforward, and the terminology as well. There's a lot to explain. So NIST have really been trying to promote a sense of urgency to upgrade encryption standards in everything on the internet. All software, to promote a sense of urgency. I remember reading that they cited a study by the Quantum Economic Development Consortia, which basically found that it took a large tech enterprise 5 years to transition to advanced encryption standards. So, if you're currently using a VPN, NordVPN, Surfshark, all of those big ones, which I've worked with in the past, in sponsorships on this channel, well, that's the sort of big tech enterprise, which will take a long time to upgrade their encryption standards. Why? Because it's so bloody complicated, and they probably don't know how. They'll have to hire people to do this, and it basically involves changing their software, pretty substantially. So that's a big problem. So if you're already using a VPN, I highly recommend, looking into this further for yourselves and deciding if you want to jump on the Cal VPN bandwagon, because it's going to take them a long time. Even NordVPN, it's going to take them a long time to bring in these post-quantum cryptographic encryption standards. I would almost bet, any sum of money, it's going to take them a long time. And we can already offer protection against them. And like I keep saying, it's no secret that America has developed black technology in the past, and they've been ahead with technology than, say, universities. So it is something we need to worry about now, and it's particularly if you're, interested in cryptocurrencies. If you've got Bitcoin, you should definitely consider this. So the development of these quantum computers is actually on a very similar trajectory as classical computers were back in the day. So the first transistor was created in 1947, right? And then the first integrated circuit was created 11 years later in 1958. And then 5 years after that was the first kind of commercial product, which were these little calculators, right? Let's take quantum computers now. So the first atomic scale transistor, Michelle Simons, created in 2012. And then 2021, the end of it, so 2 years ahead of schedule, we created the first atomic level quantum integrated circuit, which is what I was just talking about, the quantum simulation. And so from this, you can literally predict, particularly with this silicon quantum computing startup, that it seems pretty comparable to classical computing, and you could predict that some kind of commercial device and outcome, possibly due within 5 years. So now what you could potentially do with these quantum simulators that we can create, as shown by these Sydney researchers, is by creating simulating theoretical compounds that we've never understood before or simulated, such as high temperature superconductors.
So much information, so much faster, would help us to find new drugs to treat diseases. It would speed up the development of life-changing medications. Quantum computers would give us the power to better deal with climate change by allowing for better software models describing what is happening to our atmosphere. And that could help us reverse the adverse effects of climate change.
See, that is true, but, there's still a lot of things in climate physics, atmospheric physics, that we still can't model very well. For example, turbulence. You might not know that we really still don't understand turbulence too well. Crazy, I know. But a way around this is machine learning. So with a quantum computer, we could have some kind of, machine learning architecture where we can use that for modeling the climate. And we should be able to do fairly well. I'm going to predict it sounds crazy to anyone who is in that atmospheric physics area because we're just so far from accurately modeling the climate. But I think with what's going on in machine learning and AI, I think we'll approach something very close that'll give us some pretty good predictions very soon.
But it's not all good news. As we said before, no one's perfected it yet. If the first person who does wants to use the tech for...
So let me just say, he just said the first person. No, quantum computers are way too complicated. The hardware, the physics, it's just really complicated. And we're at a point where the only way to make things like this is with many, many, many people. Large teams, lots of money. That's the only way we can create these things. No person is going to be able to create this in their basement. It's just so stupid, okay? That's not going to happen. It's not possible. This is not like Bitcoin or something like that, which is actually, somewhat doable in your basement to create, another Bitcoin. Yes, you can imagine an individual doing that, but quantum computers is not on the same level, my friends. It is... To create the hardware is, like I just told you about silicon quantum computing, just to create that little lab, it took them nearly 20 years.
We could all be in trouble. As soon as a working quantum computer exists, our modern cybersecurity methods would become almost useless. Today's encryption algorithms use huge math equations and problems that are virtually impossible to solve. A quantum computer, with its 0 and 1 dualities, would have the power to solve these algorithms with relative ease.
Not all of them, just some of them that we've already got the math to do. Like I said earlier, programming quantum computers is actually not as hard as you think. Maybe we can talk about this, but there's so much esoteric stuff we could talk about here. So I'm not trying to hype up what quantum computers will be able to do in terms of world-changing feats like that. I think those will take time for sure. But what I'm emphasizing is once the powerful quantum computers exist, we already have the quantum algorithms that can break RSA and ECC. So, as soon as they exist, it's not hard to do that. Whereas the things people have been hyping up and promising, like it's going to cure death and all of this stuff, it's like, how do you just, once you have a powerful quantum computer, you then have to... It's very complicated to do anything, okay? So, it will take time, even after we've developed them, to then, say, use it for AI in specific use cases, which we have already figured out some. But, it doesn't mean as soon as they're developed that we're going to have AGI and quantum AI. No. So, just be careful with all the quantum hype out there. I'm more promoting a sense of urgency to protect your data, because as soon as they exist, all our data is at risk because we already have the quantum algorithms. So, yeah. But I think it's really important to highlight here because, everyone's aware of quantum hype these days. And physicists like Sabine Hossenfelder is doing a great job at sort of dispelling all the misinformation and a lot of the unnecessary quantum hype, because there is a lot. But what she's also emphasizing is that there are ways we can protect ourselves from powerful quantum computers already, namely post-quantum cryptography. So she is advocating this stuff, and she's also highlighted in her video, which I watched, Don't Fall for the Quantum Hype. It's already been announced that we're trying to upgrade, to these post-quantum cryptographic standards in terms of encryption. And that's what Cal VPN really is pushing. So, by being the first, we're pushing everyone else ahead with us. All right. So you can bet if we get some momentum, the other VPNs are going to quickly try and upgrade their systems. Okay. So I will also say, Cal VPN won't be the only software we create. There will be more. It's just a place to start, because I think it is probably one of the more important places that we need these post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. So yes, more software is coming, and go check out that video by Sabine. It will help dispel a lot of misinformation. She does a great job, okay? So there is a major part, though, in Sabine's video, which I disagree with, and I think is quite demonstrably wrong, which she states that in the part where she talks about quantum simulations, she thinks that they won't have a technological impact anytime soon. However, Silicon Quantum Computing, a startup in Australia by Michelle Simons, which I think it'll either be before or after. I've already talked about it in the video. It depends on the editing. They literally last month just created the first ever quantum integrated circuit. So a quantum simulation, at the atomic scale, which was able to simulate. So they're basically able to mimic by simulating the structure and energy states of the organic compound polyacetylene. So like Sabine mentions in her video, it's actually quite a paradigm shift, because it kind of results in taking out the math as the middleman. You don't need it anymore, because it's like you're actually just, when I say modeling, like it's completely mimicking. It's going to do, like the same thing. So that is really incredible. And again, she said, it won't have technological implications anytime soon. Well, we're able to do that for the first time last month. And so they're a company, they're looking to commercialize products. So you can betcha this is going to have technological impacts very soon. Who knows when they're going to start, offering some kind of commercial quantum simulation. So I think that's really incredible. Everything's changing rapidly right now. And this was actually a challenge set like 60 years ago by the one and only Richard Feynman. And he said something along the lines of, you won't be able to understand nature until you can build matter on the length scales that it exists. And so that's literally what we're doing. Like this team just demonstrated that we can build matter from the ground up. That is insane. And so this organic compound, the way they do it is, they're placing atoms in silicon at the exact same distances as this polyacetylene molecule, like the exact same single and double carbon bonds. So I think it just blows my mind. Last thing I'll say about this silicon quantum computing startup and why it is a promising route to quantum computers, and then we'll probably end the video, is because of the scalability of their tech. They use way less infrastructure and hardware than the superconducting qubit devices that Google and IBM are creating. Because in quantum systems, you need something that creates the qubits. You need some kind of structure that allows you to form a quantum state. Whereas in their system, the atoms themselves create the qubits. So that's pretty cool. And they're able to do that because of the way they're able to construct these integrated quantum circuits, atom by atom. Google and IBM can't do this yet. So I imagine they're probably going to try and replicate this approach very shortly. But that's why, they just need way fewer components and gates, because they don't need all this extra stuff to control the electrons. All right, that'll do for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. More quantum computing and Cal, specific videos coming very soon. So catch you later.